Hi friends, how are you? I hope that you all are fine. Today I am going to share with you about China and Japan relationship. China and Japan relationship is not a very cordial relationship. Rather, we can call it a strained relationship. Particularly, this relationship has been worsened since 2010, but it has become more constrained during the prime ministership of Sanai Takaichi, because she is little extraordinary leader. The works and the activities done by other prime ministers earlier was in a hush manner, or rather in an implicit manner. But what is being done by Ms. Takaichi is little explicit manner. That is why it has become a bone of contention between Xi Jinping and Takaichi. So these have what happened during the October 2025. Takaichi became Japan's prime minister, and it has exposed something deeper than ordinary bilateral friction. So, what Beijing has unleashed against Tokyo since November is not a proportionate diplomatic response to a contested remark. It is a calculated pressure campaign exploiting a pretext to test the limits of Japanese resolve, punish a leader whose security convictions unsettle Chinese planners, and intimidate other regional partners tempted to follow Tokyo's lead on Taiwan. Both the United States of America and Japan are having good and cordial relationship, and while China thinks that Taiwan is their own property, it belongs to them, and whosoever wants to supply and support Taiwan is disliked by China. Now, what happened? Takaichi has not retracted her remarks. What happened actually? Takaichi in November he said in Parliament that it is the question of intelligence, economic and intelligence security of Japan is her first and foremost importance, being the prime minister of Japan. So what happened actually? Japan is not the holder of earth resources. Okay, so Japan has to depend much on Chinese earth materials. Okay, so the latest Japanese thought is that they will neither depend on China, nor they will surrender their sovereignty or their supremacy or legal hegemony to China. Maybe China is a big country. Maybe China is having very powerful country, and China's military tank, its economy, its GDP per capita, its GDP, everything is better than Japan. And Japan, after Second World War, thought or decided that they will not spend much on defense purpose, but they have started to spend already almost 2% of their GDP in their defense. Okay, so what happened recently, what is the bone of contention, rather you can say what caused the tension. To understand Beijing's response, it is worth being clear about what Takaichi actually said on November 7, 2025, responding to an opposition lawmaker's question in the National Diet. She said that a scenario in which China deployed battleships and used force near Taiwan could constitute a survival threatening situation for Japan. So that is a very serious issue raised by Japanese Prime Minister. Under Japan's 2015 security legislation, that legal threshold enables the activation of the right of collective self-defense. This was not a provocative departure from established policy. It was a precise legal formulation responsive to a direct parliamentary question which reflected a security consensus built carefully over a decade. Japan's 2022 National Security Strategy explicitly identifies China's military modernization and coercive behavior as the primary challenge to Japan's security environment. The Takaichi administration was not inventing a new doctrine, rather, it was articulating with unusual clarity the logical extension of what successive Japanese governments had already committed to in strategic documents. Beijing chose to treat this statement as a casus belli. The People's Daily authoritative Zhongsheng column accused Takaichi of issuing a military threat against China. Chinese foreign minister officials demanded a formal retraction and characterized her remarks as a violation of the One China principle and a challenge to the post-Second World War international order. This framing was deliberate and disproportionate. No serious reading of Takaichi's statement supports the interpretation that Japan was threatening China. She described conditions under which Japan's own legal framework might be activated in defense of Japanese and allied interests. A positive and any sovereign government in similar circumstances would articulate the disproportionately of Beijing's reaction is to tell. China's leadership had already expressed discomfort with Takaichi long before the November remarks. She had visited Taiwan in April 2025 and met with President Lai Ching-te. Xi Jinping consciously declined to send even a congratulatory message when she became Prime Minister of Japan. Within 10 days of their otherwise civil APEC meeting in Gwangju, South Korea, Beijing was manufacturing a diplomatic confrontation. The November Diet remarks provided Beijing with a usable pretext, but the antagonism predated them and would have found expression regardless. What followed was a coordinated coercion playbook, not a spontaneous expression of Chinese public outrage. The seafood ban, the tourism and study abroad warnings, the diplomatic demarches, the military provocations near the Senkaku Islands, and ultimately the export controls on dual-use goods and rare earth elements were sequenced measures, not reactive ones. That sequencing reflects deliberate strategic planning. What happened? On June 6, China's military Ministry of Commerce imposed a blanket ban on export to Japan of all dual-use items for military end users or any end use that could enhance Japan's military capabilities. Consequently, the next month Beijing published two lists of 20 Japanese companies, each one facing an immediate export ban on dual-use goods. the other placed on a watch list requiring individual licensing approval. These were the most targeted corporate level economic measures China had deployed against Japan since the informal earth rare earth embargo of 2010. Rare earth elements sit at the heart of this confrontation. China controls approximately 60% of global rare earth mining and more of 90% of global refining capacity. For Japan's automotive, electronics, and defense manufacturing base, that dominance presents genuine structural vulnerability. Beijing has used it before. The 2010 embargo, imposed in response to Japan's arrest of a Chinese fishing boat captain near the Senkaku Islands, lasted roughly 2 months and roughly brought several Japanese manufacturers close to production halts. Tokyo drew the right license from 2010 and spent 15 years particularly implementing them. Japan's dependence on Chinese rare earth imports fell from approximately 90% to roughly 60 to 65% through a strategy built on overseas research investment, domestic recycling, substitute material development, and strategic compiling. The investment